The Gosden case rests first in the dry station air of King's Cross, where Andrew stepped from the train on the 14th of September 2007, and you begin tonight with that last clear image. Settle in slowly, because there is no hurry in this file. We can let the paper lie open, let the old fluorescent light hum softly above the desk, and look again at the place where a known journey became an unknown one. You can picture the photograph as it was studied later, not as a dramatic thing, but as a small square of evidence handled many times. A boy in dark clothes, a shoulder bag, the ordinary movement of a busy London morning. Around him, people crossed the concourse with coffee cups, folded newspapers, rucksacks, and train tickets still warm from their pockets. Nothing in the picture announces itself. Nothing rises above the everyday. That is part of why the Gosden case became so difficult after the station. King's Cross was not an empty platform or a lonely road. It was a moving room of strangers, footsteps, tannoy calls, wheels clicking over tile, and doors opening into more possible directions than one mind can easily hold. When you sit with the case file, you don't find one path leading away. You find many. Andrew Gosden had come down from Doncaster that morning, alone, on a train that reached London late in the morning. He had bought a single ticket, even though a return would have cost only a little more. And that small choice has been turned over so often that you can almost feel the edge of the ticket between your fingers. It may mean something. It may mean very little. Old cases often hold details like that, quiet and stubborn, refusing to become answers. Before the station, there were points on the map that investigators could still mark with confidence. A home in Balby, a walk across familiar ground, a cash machine, Doncaster station, a train south, a woman who remembered him on board, quiet and occupied with his handheld game. These things gave the morning a shape, and when you read them slowly, the shape feels almost complete. Then comes King's Cross, and the shape opens. You turn the page, and the file changes texture. The paper seems thinner here, as if every later note is trying to stretch itself across too much space. The last confirmed sighting showed Andrew leaving the station, and after that, the investigation had to ask a simple question that was not simple at all. Where could one 14-year-old boy go in central London after stepping out into the noise and light of the city? It helps to imagine the old King's Cross area as it was then, with the smell of diesel still clinging near the roads, warm metal from buses, damp pavement, food wrappers near bins, and a steady flow of people who had somewhere to be. You stand there in your mind with the detectives, but you don't rush. You let the morning continue at its own pace. Andrew could have crossed toward the underground. He could have turned toward the streets. He could have gone to meet someone, or to visit somewhere alone, or to do something that only made sense to him. That is the quiet weight of the Gosden case. The confirmed facts stop at a public doorway. In missing person work, the first hours matter because the world is still holding fresh traces. A ticket seller may remember a face. A camera may still have footage. A passenger may still recall the seat beside them. The sound of buttons pressed on a game console. The glimpse of dark hair and glasses. But traces don't stay fresh for long. They fade into overwritten tapes, cleaned trains, cleared station bins, and memories softened by sleep. When Andrew didn't arrive home that evening, his family first moved through the ordinary explanations that families reach for before fear settles in. Perhaps he was downstairs. Perhaps he was with someone nearby. Perhaps there had been a mistake. You can feel the house in that moment, the quiet rooms, the cooling evening air, the small domestic sounds that suddenly became too loud. Then came the calls, the realization that he had not been at school, and the beginning of a search no one in that house had ever expected to make. The school had tried to contact his parents earlier, but the message went to the wrong number. That, too, sits in the Gosden case like a small hinge on a large door. If the call had reached the right home sooner, perhaps the timeline would have tightened. Perhaps searches would have begun while the morning was still close. But old files are full of perhaps, and we handle them gently because perhaps can become a heavy word. You let that fact rest on the desk without forcing it. The wrong call did not explain where Andrew went. It only meant that time passed. And in a case like this, time is not empty. Time is footage being recorded over, witnesses leaving the area, ticket barriers swallowing paper records, and a city absorbing one more person into its ordinary crowds. The police later confirmed his journey to London after speaking with the ticket seller at Doncaster station. She remembered the single ticket, and she remembered that a return was offered for only a little more. It is easy, years later, to lean too hard on that moment, as if one conversation at a ticket window must contain a secret. But when you sit with it quietly, you can hear how ordinary it may have sounded. A young person asks for a ticket. The clerk offers the cheaper sense of the return. He still wants the single. There is a certain softness in not pretending we know why. Maybe Andrew expected to stay with someone. Maybe he did not think about coming back in those terms. Maybe, at 14, the difference between a single and a return felt less like a clue than a decision made at a counter, with people waiting behind him and the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere nearby. The case went cold after the station, because the station was both specific and enormous. It gave investigators one clear image, then handed them London. You can imagine the detectives looking at maps, tracing circles around King's Cross with pens that left faint blue pressure marks on the paper. Within walking distance were shops, museums, music venues, cinemas, fast food counters, side streets, bus stops, underground lines, and railway routes leading outward again. Each possibility needed time, each direction needed checking, and every hour made the checking harder. The first searches in London included places linked to family, such as areas where relatives lived. That made sense at the time. Investigators work from what they can verify, and family connections are visible on the page. They can be called, visited, listed, and ruled through. But Andrew was also a boy with interests of his own, and interests leave a different kind of trail. They are softer. They lead to posters, websites, album names, shop windows, exhibitions, and places a person may visit without telling anyone. His family later handed out flyers near places they thought might have drawn him. Museums, exhibitions, areas connected with music or curiosity. You can picture them holding paper in the London air, the corners bending slightly in the breeze, faces passing by with the quick politeness of strangers. The city does not mean to be unkind, it simply moves. In the Gosden case, one of the most patient questions has always been whether Andrew intended a short trip or a longer absence. He took money, his keys, his wallet, and his PSP. He did not take a coat, a passport, or the charger for the PSP. He left other savings behind. These details do not line up neatly, and you can feel investigators returning to them because they are among the few things that remain still enough to study. A missing coat can feel important when you know the weather may turn cool. A missing charger can feel important when a handheld game will eventually run down. A key can feel important because it suggests return, or habit, or simply the automatic act of taking what one always takes. In cold cases, the smallest objects become quiet witnesses, but they do not always speak clearly. You sit with the objects, and you resist making them louder than they are. That is part of patient detective work. It is not only finding clues, it is learning which clues can bear weight, and which ones bend when you lean on them. After King's Cross, the investigation depended heavily on CCTV, and CCTV in 2007 was not the seamless net people sometimes imagine now. Cameras existed, yes, especially in stations and city streets. But access was uneven. Retention periods were limited, image quality varied, and someone had to know what to request before the footage disappeared. The Gosden case came to rest in that gap between what cameras might have seen and what investigators could still recover. There was footage from King's Cross showing Andrew leaving the station, but it was not identified immediately. By the time that image became central, other possible recordings may already have been gone. Bus cameras, underground footage, nearby street cameras, shop cameras. Each system had its own rules, its own storage time, its own ordinary habit of recording over yesterday to make room for tomorrow. You can hear the soft click of a tape being reused, or the quiet whir of a hard drive writing new images over old ones. Not maliciously, not with meaning, just the routine housekeeping of machines. That routine is one reason the Gosden case went cold. The city may have recorded parts of Andrew's next steps, but the investigation did not gather every possible piece before time narrowed the door. This is not said with sharpness. It is simply part of the file. Missing person investigations depend on speed, coordination, and imagination, and when any one of those is delayed, the trail can become thinner than anyone intended. As you read, you may pause over the phrase "last confirmed sighting." It sounds formal, almost dry, but it carries a great deal. It means not that nothing else happened, and not that nobody saw him, but that later reports could not be fixed firmly enough to the timeline. A confirmed sighting is a peg in the board. An unconfirmed sighting is a thread held carefully between fingers. There were possible sightings after Andrew reached London. Some were close in time. Some came later. Oxford Street, Covent Garden. Other places named by people who thought they had seen a boy who looked like him. The family regarded some reports as more plausible than others, especially those early ones that seemed to carry small details of manner or speech. But a possible sighting is a fragile thing. It can be sincere and still be wrong. You can imagine a witness years later, or even days later, trying to recover a face from memory. The lighting in a restaurant, the shine of a table, a black t-shirt, glasses, a boy speaking softly, or not speaking much at all. The memory may feel real, and the person offering it may be doing so with care. Still, investigators must ask whether the memory attaches to Andrew or to the idea of Andrew after seeing his face in appeals. That is another reason the file grew quiet. Sightings came in, but certainty did not. In patient detective work, uncertainty is not useless. It is catalogued, mapped, compared, and sometimes revisited. You write the location in a notebook. You mark the date. You ask who was working that day, whether receipts exist, whether a camera faced that corner, whether staff remember anything beyond the general busyness of a Friday. The work is slow and human, and much of it ends with a line that says nothing could be confirmed. Those lines can look empty to someone reading quickly. To a detective, they are evidence of labor. Someone asked. Someone waited on a call. Someone checked a log. Someone stood under a strip light in a back office, while a manager searched for old footage that might already have been overwritten. Cold cases are built not only from discoveries, but from these quiet non-discoveries. Andrew's family kept searching in their own way too. They kept his room. They did not change the locks because he had taken his key. That detail belongs in the file, not because it solves anything, but because it tells you something about waiting. A key in a missing person's pocket can become more than metal. It becomes a small permission for hope to remain practical. You can picture the house holding its breath around that fact. The familiar door, the ordinary lock, the possibility that someone might one day need to use the key they carried away. It is a gentle and painful kind of patience, and in the Gosden case, patience has always belonged to the family as much as to investigators. The digital side of the inquiry also led to a quiet place. Investigators explored whether Andrew might have been communicating with someone online, but the known evidence did not show that. He did not have the kind of visible internet life many people would expect now. Computers from school and the library were examined. His PSP details were checked with Sony. No clear sign emerged that he had arranged to meet someone through those channels. For a modern listener, that can feel surprising. We are used to trails made of messages, accounts, searches, location data, and little timestamps left behind like breadcrumbs. But in 2007, especially for a child who did not seem strongly drawn to online social life, the absence of a digital trail could be real. You sit with that absence, and it makes the case feel older than the date on the page. The Gosden case stands at a threshold between eras. There were cameras, but not enough gathered in time. There were digital devices, but not the constant cloud of records we imagine now. There were appeals, posters, and national attention, but not a single confirmed step beyond King's Cross. It is a case shaped by what was available, what was missed, and what simply never existed. That threshold matters. A few years later, a journey like Andrew's might have left more traces. A phone might have pinged. A bank card might have tapped through a barrier. A message might have placed a meeting in time. But Andrew had no phone with him. His bank account was not used again, and after the cash withdrawal that morning, money became silent. Cash is quiet in a way cards are not. It passes from hand to hand without leaving a friendly trail for detectives. A sandwich, a ticket, a cinema seat, a warm drink in a paper cup, all could be bought without later telling anyone where he had been. When you think about why the case went cold after the station, you have to let that silence sit beside the noise of London. There is also the matter of age. Andrew was 14, but he was said by some to look younger. He was quiet, bright, and not especially streetwise, according to his family. Those details are often repeated, and they should be treated with care. They help us understand how loved ones saw him, and why the journey felt so out of character, but they do not tell us what he was thinking as the train moved south. A person can be quiet and still have private plans. A person can be young and still make deliberate choices. A person can be loved and still carry thoughts they do not share. When you review the Gosden file, you learn to hold all of these truths without forcing them to choose one answer. The morning before the station has a strange domestic clarity. Andrew was seen leaving home as if for school. He diverted, withdrew money, came back, changed clothes, placed his uniform where it would later be found, and left again. These are not the movements of someone who vanished from the road without preparation. They show intention, at least for that morning. But intention is not the same as destination. You can almost hear the soft rustle of clothing, the small sounds of a house briefly empty, the ordinary weight of a bag lifted from where it usually rested. The uniform in the washing machine has been mentioned many times because it feels deliberate. The blazer left behind has its own stillness, yet even these details do not tell us whether Andrew expected to be gone for hours, days, or longer. Detectives often have to separate planning from purpose. Planning can be visible. Purpose can remain hidden. When the file reaches King's Cross, purpose becomes the missing center. The station camera tells us Andrew arrived. It tells us he left the main entrance. It does not tell us whether he turned with confidence, hesitation, curiosity, or simple routine. It does not tell us whether he was meeting someone, avoiding someone, looking for a place, or following an idea he had kept to himself. You may find yourself wanting the camera to give more. Everyone does. You want one more angle, one more minute, one more glimpse of his face as he looked toward the street. But the image does only what an image can do. It preserves a surface. The rest remains outside the frame. That outside the frame space became the cold part of the Gosden case. In the days that followed, appeals widened, posters appeared, news reports carried his photograph. People who thought they had seen him contacted police or family. Each report had to be handled with some balance of hope and caution. Too much hope can wound a family again. Too much caution can let a lead cool. Patient investigators learn to move between the two, even when neither feels comfortable. You can see the records box filling, a call from one place, a note from another, a possible sighting near a restaurant, a possible boy in a park, a possible movement through another station. The paper grows thicker, but the confirmed line does not extend. Sometimes a cold case is not thin because nobody cared. Sometimes it is thick with effort, and still the answer is not there. That can be hard to accept, especially when the beginning is so clear. Andrew did not disappear from a nameless place. He was traced from home to cash machine to station, to train to King's Cross. The first part of the morning feels almost documentary. Then, at the exact place where cameras and crowds should have helped most, the path dissolves. Cities are good at dissolving paths. They offer anonymity without intending to. A teenager can walk beside office workers, tourists, students, cleaners, drivers, and people carrying lunch bags, and for a few seconds he is visible to all of them and known by none. Later, when a photograph is shown, some may search their memories. Most will find only the blur of an ordinary day. You and I can sit with that, without turning it into drama. It is simply what large places do. There is an archive smell to this case now. The faint dust of old folders and printed appeals, the slightly glossy surface of age-progressed images, the dry crease of newspaper clippings, kept because they might matter someday. Years passed, but the investigation did not vanish. It changed form. It became periodic appeals, renewed attention, technical checks, family interviews, and the steady work of keeping Andrew's name visible without knowing where he was. In 2009, age-progressed images were released to show how he might look at 16. Later images imagined him older still. These pictures are unusual documents. They are not evidence in the ordinary sense. They are invitations to recognition, attempts to bridge time with a face. You look at them and feel the tenderness of the effort, because the file is asking the public to imagine growth where the known record stopped. The Gosden case went cold, not because there were no questions, but because there were too many unanswered ones, and too few fixed points after London. Every theory needed something to hold it. A planned meeting needed communication. A voluntary disappearance needed survival traces. An accident needed a location. A crime needed evidence. The station gave none of those things beyond arrival and departure, so the work became patient elimination. Check the bank account. No use. Check passport records. No ordinary trail. Check medical, dental, and official systems. Keep DNA and fingerprints available for comparison. Review unidentified cases. Follow reports. Speak again when anniversaries bring the case back into public memory. The work may look repetitive, but repetition is often how cold cases stay alive. You can imagine an officer, years later, opening the file with slower hands. The facts are familiar now. The same date, the same train, the same CCTV still. Yet familiar does not mean finished. A small update in technology, a fresh witness, a person finally ready to speak, or a database comparison can change an old file after years of silence. Cold case work is built on that humble possibility. Still, possibility is not an answer. One later development, many years after Andrew disappeared, brought renewed attention when two men were arrested in connection with the investigation. Devices were examined, and the process took time, as digital forensics often does. But those men were later released without charge, and police said they were confident the men had played no part in Andrew's disappearance. The file returned again to its old quiet. That is important to say gently, because a listener may remember the arrests and wonder whether they changed the ending. They did not bring Andrew home. They did not explain the station. They did not close the case. They became another section in the long record, another place where investigators followed a path and found it did not lead to the answer. You place that section back in the box, not with frustration, but with care. In patient detective work, ruling something out matters. It keeps the search honest. It prevents a family from being left with a false shape where truth should be. But it also means returning to the harder landscape, the one where the last confirmed point is still King's Cross. The case remains unsolved, and Andrew Gosden remains missing. No one has been charged in a way that explains what happened after he left the station, and the reason for his journey has never been established. That status is not a closing door so much as an honest lamp left on over the file. It tells us where the record truly stands. And for tonight, we stay with the record as it is. You can turn back again to that morning and notice the small human things, because those are where the case breathes. A boy who liked games and music, a school day that did not unfold as expected, a train ticket held in a station, a bag with patches, a city that received him without understanding that people would still be searching years later. The more time passes, the more the Gosden case asks for humility. We do not know whether Andrew's choices that morning were careful or impulsive. We do not know whether he expected to return. We do not know whether someone waited for him or whether London itself was the reason. The file gives us facts, but it does not give us his thoughts. You may feel, as many do, that the station is almost too ordinary to bear. No locked door, no remote landscape, no single narrow lane, just a public exit, a crowd, and a boy walking into the rest of the day. The case went cold there because ordinary places can hide extraordinary absence. They do it by continuing. Trains kept arriving, announcements kept echoing, commuters kept crossing the floor. Coffee cooled in paper cups. The station cleaned itself for another morning, and somewhere inside that motion, the trace investigators needed became harder to find. So we sit with the patient work instead of a neat answer. We sit with the people who searched, the family who waited, the officers who returned to old notes, the witnesses who wondered whether a face they remembered might matter. We sit with the limits of cameras, the silence of cash, the softness of memory, and the way a city can make one person hard to follow. The desk lamp is low now, and the file is still open. Not solved, not forgotten. The Gosden case remains there, at the edge of the station, asking the same quiet question it has asked for years. After Andrew stepped into London, which way did the day take him? And because the question is gentle enough to survive all these years, we can keep looking at it without trying to force it closed. You let your eyes rest on the station image again, and the first thing you notice is not a dramatic clue, but the ordinary distance between a camera and a person. A lens looks down from above. People move beneath it, and the details become smaller than memory wants them to be. You can tell Andrew is there, and that matters, but you cannot step beside him. When we think about why the Gosden case went cold after the station, we have to spend time with the limits of that image. It is a confirmation, not an explanation, and in patient investigation those two things are very different. The camera gives a place, a rough time, a direction of travel, and the knowledge that Andrew left King's Cross under his own power. It does not give tone, intention, expression, or the invisible weight of whatever he carried in his mind that morning. You can almost hear the station doors breathe open and closed, letting people spill outward into the pale London day. That is where detectives would have wanted another camera, then another, and then perhaps a witness who remembered him clearly. You can imagine them moving from one possible recording point to the next, asking at counters and transport offices, listening to the buzz of old monitors and the soft scrape of chairs on worn floors. Every request took time, and every storage system had its own little clock running down. In a case like this, time is not only passing in the family home, it is passing inside machines, The difficulty after King's Cross was not that London had no eyes. It had many, but they were scattered, imperfect, and often temporary. Some cameras watched entrances, some watched tills, some watched platforms, not pavements. Some recorded over themselves after a few days or held images only if someone knew to save them. We can sit with that quietly, because it helps explain how a city full of cameras can still leave a missing person's path unfinished. The modern mind sometimes imagines surveillance as a single connected fabric, stretching smoothly over streets and stations. In 2007, it was more like a box of mismatched photographs, each one owned by a different person, shop, service, or transport body. You had to know where to ask, and you had to ask soon. The map of possible requests was wide, and the confirmed lead was narrow. Andrew had left the station, and outside it the whole city opened like a file with too many folders. If you sit at the detective's desk tonight, you may find yourself drawing circles around King's Cross. First the closest streets, then the bus stops, then the underground entrances and the routes that could carry someone across London without leaving much trace. Then the places a young person might choose because they were interesting, familiar from maps, mentioned online, known through music, or simply visible from the road. Each circle grows, and with each circle, the number of questions grows with it. There was no confirmed phone signal to follow, no later card payment, and no message that placed Andrew in another part of the city. That absence has its own texture in the file, a kind of pale blankness between printed lines. You can hold the page under the lamp and feel how much work has gone into proving that nothing useful appeared. The silence of an unused bank account, an unused passport, and a missing digital trail is not empty to investigators. It tells them where the path did not go, even while it refuses to say where it did. Cash changes the shape of an inquiry. If Andrew bought food, a drink, a ticket, or anything small after leaving King's Cross, the purchase may have left no name behind. A paper cup could be thrown away, a receipt could be lost, a counter worker could serve hundreds of faces before evening. You and I can imagine the warmth of coins in a palm, the sound of them placed on a shop counter, and then the transaction becoming part of the day's general noise. That general noise is one of the quietest obstacles in the Gosden case. It is not a villain, and it is not a plot. It is simply the everyday life of London, continuing at its normal speed while one family slowly realized something had gone very wrong. By the time Andrew's journey to King's Cross became clear enough to focus the search there, many people who had crossed his path may never have known they were witnesses. They were already home, or on another train, or at work the next morning with yesterday folded away. Witness memory is a delicate thing. You know this when you look at old appeals and possible sightings, because each person who came forward was trying to help, but each person was also reaching back into a crowded day. The smell of rain on coats, the glare of shop lights, the press of bodies near a doorway, the blur of a face seen for seconds, all of it can shift after a photograph appears in the news. A memory can become sincere and uncertain at the same time. In patient detective work, sincere does not always mean confirmed, so investigators had to ask careful questions. What time did you see him? What was he wearing? Did he speak? Was he alone? Did anything about him stand out before you saw the appeal, or only afterward? You can hear the steadiness required in those interviews, because the person calling may be hopeful, nervous, apologetic, or convinced. The officer has to honor the effort without letting hope outrun the facts. That too is part of why the case slowed. The early possible sightings were important because they suggested that Andrew may have moved beyond the station, but they did not fix the route firmly enough. Some reports placed a boy resembling him in parts of London, associated with shops, restaurants, or public spaces. Others came later, and from farther away. We can imagine the notes gathering in a binder, each one tagged with a date, time, and place, each one waiting for comparison. Yet, without CCTV, receipts, names, or a second witness, many remained possible rather than certain. That word, Possible is small, but in an old file it can take up a whole shelf. Possible means someone cared enough to call. Possible means detectives could not ignore it. Possible means the family may have had to let a little hope rise, then wait while the lead was checked. But possible also means the line on the map cannot yet be drawn in ink. It can only be sketched, lightly, in pencil. You may notice how often the Gosden case returns to this difference between pencil and ink. The journey to Doncaster station is ink. The cash withdrawal is ink. The train is ink. The King's Cross footage is ink. After that, the paper becomes softer. There are marks, but they do not darken into certainty. And if you are the detective tonight, sitting with the file under a small lamp, you learn to respect that boundary. Respecting uncertainty does not mean doing nothing, it means doing the slow work correctly. You keep the possible sightings. You compare clothing descriptions. You revisit timings. You ask whether a person could have walked from King's Cross to another named location within the time claimed. You check whether an event was on that day, whether school holidays affected crowds, whether transport delays might explain a gap. The work is quiet, and much of it leaves no satisfying paragraph behind. There is a particular patience in looking at transport possibilities. From King's Cross, Andrew could have reached underground lines, buses, taxis, streets leading toward Euston, Bloomsbury, the West End, Camden, or many other places. Each option opens into another set of options, like doors along a corridor. You can trace them with your finger on a map, feeling the smooth paper beneath you and the slight ridge of a fold near the station. The routes multiply until the certainty of arrival begins to feel very small. Investigators would have had to think about practical behavior as well as geography. Would Andrew have known the London Underground well enough to use it comfortably? Would he have walked? Would he have asked for directions? Would he have followed signs towards something he had planned, or wandered first, taking in the city? The file cannot answer these questions, but asking them matters, because every assumption changes where you look next. A quiet boy can still read a map. A clever boy can still get lost. There is also the question of why London, and why that Friday. Andrew had perfect attendance, or close enough that absence was unusual, and his decision to miss school stood out sharply to those who knew him. He was not known for running away before. He was not known to have obvious trouble that explained such a journey. You can imagine his teachers and family trying to reconcile the Andrew they knew with the action on the page. The action was real, but the meaning was hidden. That hidden meaning has made the Gosden case particularly hard to settle into one theory. If a person leaves after an argument, investigators can begin there. If a person disappears after a known plan, they can trace the plan. If a person has ongoing contact with someone, they can examine that contact. With Andrew, the known preparation points toward intention, but the lack of a known motive leaves that intention untranslated. We can read the movements, but not the sentence they form. Sometimes people have suggested he may have gone to London for a concert, a shop, a museum, or simply a day away. These ideas are understandable because they connect to interests and to the city itself. London held music venues, exhibitions, and places a young person with curiosity might want to see. But a possibility connected to personality is still not proof. You can set it on the desk, beside the ticket and the CCTV still, and let it remain one possible shape among many. The case went cold after the station because the investigation could not locate the next definite action. If Andrew had bought another ticket, there might have been a record or a witness. If he had used a bank card, there might have been a timestamp. If he had called home, the line would have pulled tight. If he had been stopped by staff, helped by someone, or photographed clearly elsewhere, the file would have had another anchor. Instead, after the station, everything floated. Floating evidence is hard on a family. It is hard on detectives too, though in a quieter professional way. You can imagine a detective returning to the same board, The same pinned photographs, the same map, and feeling the pull of all the routes that have not been ruled out. There is no single door to knock on. There are thousands of doors, most of them already ordinary again by the time anyone asks. The scale of London becomes part of the coldness. At home in Doncaster, the scale was different. Streets had names that belonged to daily life. Neighbors could be asked. A route to school could be walked and re-walked. The cash machine had a location. The station had staff. In London, Andrew's possible surroundings became wider, louder, less personal. A missing person inquiry must move from the intimate knowledge of family into the impersonal machinery of a city. And that change can be felt in the file. You can sense it in the way descriptions had to become public. Brown hair, glasses, a slipknot t-shirt, often mentioned in appeals, a black shoulder bag. These details were repeated because they were useful, but also because repetition is how a missing person remains visible. Each appeal placed Andrew's image back into the world, hoping to reach one person who had seen him clearly. The words became familiar, almost worn smooth by use, but they stayed necessary. There is tenderness in repeated appeals. They ask strangers to do an intimate thing, to search memory. They ask someone on a bus, in a shop, at a station, or walking past a doorway to look backward and notice what they did not know mattered. We can imagine a person pausing over a newspaper photograph, the page faintly inky beneath their fingers, wondering whether the boy they saw was Andrew or someone else. That pause may not solve the case, but it belongs to the long community of attention around it. Attention, however, fades in public, even when it stays fierce in a family. News cycles move, posters weather, online discussions rise and settle. People who were teenagers when Andrew vanished become adults with their own children, jobs, worries, and old memories. The family does not move in the same way. For them, the date stays close, the door stays meaningful, the key remains a fact in the heart as much as in the file. This difference between public time and family time matters in cold cases. Public time asks, has there been an update? Family time asks, where is he? Public time can wait for anniversaries. Family time wakes up every morning. When you sit with the Gosden case, you are sitting with both clocks. One ticks loudly in the world when an appeal is made. The other is softer, steadier, and never really stops. Cold case investigators often inherit files shaped by those two clocks. They receive folders with old statements, media logs, forensic records, search notes, and details gathered under pressure by earlier officers. They also inherit promises, spoken or unspoken, that the case will not simply be put away. You can picture a cold case desk with paper edges curled slightly from use, a mug cooling near a keyboard, and a detective reading names that have become familiar through repetition. The task is to find fresh movement in old material. In the Gosden case, fresh movement has often depended on revisiting assumptions. Did Andrew travel alone by choice? Did anyone know he was coming? Was London the destination, or a transfer point? Was the single ticket meaningful? Did he plan to return but not by train? Did he avoid leaving digital traces intentionally, or was there simply no digital trail to leave? Each question is calm on the page, but each one opens a different landscape. You might think of the single ticket again, because it has followed the case for years. The ticket seller reportedly offered a return for a small additional cost, and Andrew declined. We should not make that moment heavier than it can bear, but we also cannot leave it out. A 14-year-old buying a single to London on a school day is a strange enough fact to matter. Yet the meaning of that refusal remains unfixed. Maybe he believed he would return another way. Maybe he expected someone to drive him. Maybe he did not understand or care about the price difference. Maybe he was focused on getting away from the counter before questions could form. You can see how each possibility reflects a different Andrew, and none can be chosen from the ticket alone. The ticket is a clue in shape, but not in speech. It tells us what was bought, not why. The PSP is another quiet object in the file. It places Andrew as a boy of his time, holding a small screen, buttons clicking under his fingers, attention drawn into a game during the train ride. A witness remembered him playing, which helps give the journey texture. It was not a wild movement through chaos. It was a train ride with a child sitting quietly, absorbed in something handheld and familiar. You can hear the faint plastic taps beneath the carriage noise. The charger being left behind has troubled people for years. If he planned a long absence, why not take it? If he planned only a day trip, why take so much money? These questions sit together without resolving each other. In patient work, contradictions are not always signs of hidden design. Sometimes they are signs of youth, haste, partial planning, or a private reason that does not match adult expectations. We can keep the contradiction without sharpening it into certainty. The same is true of his phone, or rather, the absence of one with him. Andrew had reportedly lost or stopped using mobile phones before, and he was not carrying one that could be tracked that day. Today, that feels almost unimaginable for a missing child inquiry. Then, it was still unusual, but not impossible. Without a phone, there were no pings, no call records, no last text to examine, no little electronic shadow moving through the city beside him. That absence made the station exit far more important. If Andrew had carried a live phone, King's Cross might have been one point among many. Without it, King's Cross became the last fixed mark. You can see why investigators and family returned to that image again and again. It was not merely a photograph, it was the last place where the unknown had not yet taken over. It was the edge of the known world. After the edge, there is the public appeal, and appeals have their own life. They must be clear enough to be useful, but not so narrow that they close off possibilities. They must describe clothing, age, accent, interests, and last movements. They must ask for help without overwhelming the people who may have only a fragment. You can imagine the care behind each word, the way a family and police might decide what to say, what to repeat, and what to hold back for checking future reports. Holding back details can be important. If a caller gives information not widely known, it may carry more weight. But missing person appeals also need enough detail to stir recognition. That balance is delicate. Too little, and the public cannot help. Too much, and memory may be shaped by the appeal itself. The Gosden case sat inside that balance from the beginning, asking strangers to notice a boy while also preserving the investigation's ability to test what came in. There is no simple way to ask a city to remember. You put up posters, you speak to journalists, you show photographs, you repeat dates and places. You return on anniversaries, because anniversaries make newspapers and viewers look again. But the city itself does not pause. It keeps selling tickets, opening shops, cleaning platforms, and carrying people through the same station where Andrew was last confirmed. The place continues, while the file remains open. If you visit King's Cross years later, it is not exactly the same station. Buildings change, entrances shift, shops open and close, old surfaces are replaced, and the area around it transforms. That physical change adds another layer to the investigation. Detectives can still use records, maps, and footage, but the lived feel of the place has moved on. A witness remembering a doorway may be remembering a doorway that no longer looks the same. You and I can feel how time changes even the ground beneath a clue. The reconstruction of place is a quiet skill. Investigators look at old photographs, transport plans, business records, and street layouts. They ask where a camera faced then, not now. They ask which exit was most likely, which roadworks existed, which shops were open, which signs a teenager would have seen. The work has the soft dust of archives in it, and the precise patience of someone matching old paper to present streets. In the Gosden case, that reconstruction matters, because the first few minutes after the station, may have shaped everything that followed. Those first few minutes are the part your mind may return to most often. Andrew leaves the station. He steps into London. Perhaps he pauses. Perhaps he does not. Perhaps the air smells of bus exhaust and warm pavement. Perhaps he hears the scrape of luggage wheels and the layered voices of strangers. If he had a destination, he might have turned toward it. If he did not, he might have looked around and chosen the next movement by instinct. We must be careful here, because imagining is not knowing. But gentle imagination can help us understand the investigative problem. From one exit, a person can vanish into a crowd without hiding. They only need to keep walking. That is a hard truth in a missing persons file, and it is especially hard when the person is young. You can feel the detectives facing that truth, not dramatically, but as a practical matter of streets and time. The family, meanwhile, faced something different. They had to live with the private absence behind the public facts. Andrew's father, mother, and sister have spoken over the years with care and endurance, trying to keep his name present while not reducing him to a mystery. You can hear in that effort the tired dignity of people who have answered similar questions many times. The case file may hold statements, but a family holds the life around them. That life included Andrew's character, his routines, his talents, and the ordinary details that made him more than the last journey. He was bright. He had interests in music and games. He had attended a summer program for gifted children. He was described as quiet, thoughtful, and independent in certain ways. These details matter because they prevent the investigation from becoming only a map. They remind us that the missing person at the center was someone known deeply by others. But personality can become a difficult tool. If people say Andrew was unlikely to run away, investigators must take that seriously. If his actions show he did leave deliberately that morning, investigators must take that seriously too. A person may act outside pattern once, and the file must hold both the pattern and the exception. You can feel the tension there, but it is not a thriller's tension. It is the sober tension of human complexity. The station is where that complexity becomes most visible. Everything before it suggests Andrew made choices. Everything after it suggests those choices did not leave enough trace. That is why the case did not simply settle into one explanation. A voluntary absence did not produce the usual long-term signs. A planned meeting did not produce confirmed communication. A misadventure did not produce a location. A harmful encounter did not produce evidence strong enough to charge anyone. Each theory reaches toward the station, then loses grip. Years of discussion have gathered around those theories, and some of it has been careful, while some has not. In a sleep retelling like this, we stay with care. We do not need to name every speculation or let the mind run toward darkness. The honest question is enough. After King's Cross, what evidence was there, and why could it not carry the investigation farther? That question keeps us close to patient detective work, where the aim is not to be dramatic, but to be accurate and kind. Accuracy means saying what the station did provide. It provided confirmation that Andrew reached London alive and alone, at least in the visible frame. It showed clothing and movement consistent with other known facts. It fixed a time range. It gave investigators a starting point for London inquiries. Those are meaningful things. You can place them in a small stack on the desk, and the stack is not empty. It simply is not enough. Kindness means remembering what the station did not provide, and how hard that must have been. It did not show a companion. It did not show a destination. It did not show distress or certainty in a way that could be used. It did not continue down the road with him. For a family watching or hearing about that footage, the image may have been both a relief and a wound. It said he arrived, and then it stopped. The stopping is what we keep returning to. A case can go cold even while people continue working, because going cold means the available leads no longer produce forward motion. It does not mean the person is forgotten. It does not mean every question has been asked perfectly. It means the case has entered a long season where each new movement depends on chance, technology, or someone speaking after time has passed. The Gosden case has lived in that season for many years. Chance can be powerful in cold cases. A person cleaning out a drawer finds an old photograph. A former worker remembers a shift. A database links two records that once sat apart. A family member of a witness hears a story repeated and decides to call. These are not dramatic miracles. They are small late movements. Investigators keep files open because small late movements do happen, and because someone has to be ready when they do. Technology can also return to old evidence with new patience. Digital images can be enhanced within limits. Databases can compare unidentified records more widely. Appeals can reach people who were once unreachable. Age progression can help, though it cannot guarantee recognition. The Gosden case has benefited from renewed attention in different eras of technology. But attention is not the same as discovery. You can feel the difference in the file, like the difference between a lamp being turned on and a door being opened. Someone speaking is perhaps the oldest cold case hope. It may be a witness who was unsure, a person who held back from embarrassment, a person who once dismissed a memory as unimportant, or someone who knows more than they said. Appeals often return to this quiet invitation. If you remember something, even something small, come forward. If you thought it did not matter then, it may matter now. In the Gosden case, that invitation has never really left the air. The difficulty is that after many years, memory changes shape. A witness may no longer know whether they remember the day or the appeal. Places change, names fade. The exact time of a lunch break, the route of a bus, the look of a boy near a shop window, all may soften at the edges. Still, investigators do not discard memory only because it is old. They test it, they compare it. They look for the small fixed points inside it. You can imagine such a conversation taking place long after the disappearance. A person sits across from an officer, hands around a cup, trying to speak carefully. They say they are not sure. They say it has bothered them. They say the boy had glasses, or a bag, or seemed alone. The officer listens without pushing the memory beyond what it can bear. This is patient work, and it has a different sound from interrogation. It sounds like pages turning slowly. The station, in that kind of conversation, becomes a starting bell that no one heard at the time. If someone saw Andrew one street away, they may not have connected him to anything. If someone spoke to him at a counter, they may have forgotten by evening. If someone noticed him on a bus, the memory may have been ordinary until the appeal aired. The tragedy of the timing is that the world did not know, in those first hours, that it needed to remember. This is why the misdirected school call has remained important. It did not cause the disappearance, but it affected how soon the search became urgent. If Andrew's family had known earlier that he was absent, they might have raised the alarm sooner. Perhaps King's Cross inquiries would have begun sooner. Perhaps more footage would have remained. We say perhaps because we must, but the word is heavy enough without pressing it harder. In the file, it marks lost hours. Lost hours are not empty hours. They are a train arriving, a boy leaving a station, lunch crowds forming, shop shutters lifting, buses moving, camera systems recording and then waiting to be overwritten. They are family members going through the day unaware. They are teachers thinking a call has gone home. They are hundreds of witnesses not yet knowing they are witnesses. When you sit with those hours, you understand how a case can cool before anyone realizes it is on fire. Even so, the response that followed was substantial. Searches were made. Appeals went out. Officers examined computers, spoke to contacts, reviewed transport, and followed reports. Family and supporters kept Andrew's image in public view. The case did not go cold because nobody looked. It went cold because the looking did not find the next anchor. That distinction matters, and we keep it clear. Effort and outcome do not always match in the world of missing people. You can feel that mismatch in the thickness of an old file. More pages do not always mean more certainty. Sometimes they mean more attempts, more calls, more places checked and crossed through, more hopes carefully tested. The paper may smell faintly of storage, and the ink may show the habits of different officers over different years. Each hand adds something, and still the central question remains. The weight of the file is not the same as the weight of an answer. As the years passed, public knowledge of Andrew also became fixed around certain images. The schoolboy photograph, the CCTV still, the age progression, the description of his clothes. These images help people remember, but they can also freeze a missing person at the point of disappearance. A family knows better. They know the child who laughed, read, listened to music, and moved through ordinary rooms. We, as listeners, can remember that too, because it keeps the mystery human rather than decorative. The human side also includes the investigators who had to work with what they had. It is easy, many years later, to look at missed opportunities and feel the ache of them. Why was footage not gathered faster? Why did the school call fail? Why did the station image not lead onward? These questions are valid, and some have been asked by the family and the public. But when we ask them tonight, we do so softly, because behind every institutional failure or limitation are people working inside imperfect systems. Imperfect systems are a recurring theme in cold cases. A phone number recorded wrong, a camera retention policy too short, a report filed under a slightly different description, a witness who cannot be found again, a young person without a phone. None of these things alone explains the Gosden case, but together they create the conditions in which a path can vanish. You can see the pattern only after time has made it painful. Looking back can create an illusion that the correct path should have been obvious. You know, Andrew went to London, so every London lead feels urgent from the beginning. But on the day itself, the information arrived piece by piece. First absence, then confusion, then family searching, then the discovery that he had not been at school, then the cash withdrawal, then Doncaster station, then the train, then King's Cross. Each step took time to establish. That sequence matters because investigations are not conducted from the future. They unfold from uncertainty. At each point, officers and family were learning what you and I now read in a few lines. The smooth timeline we hold tonight was not smooth when it was being built. It was made from calls, checks, worry, waiting, and the slow gathering of facts. The file may look orderly now, but it was once a room full of unanswered questions. You turn another page, and the subject of London addresses appears again. Family connections were checked because they were logical. If Andrew had gone to London, perhaps he had gone to someone he knew, but the known family links did not produce him. That left investigators with a wider set of possibilities, most of them less personal, and therefore harder to trace. A person can be looked for at an address. A person wandering through a city is harder to find. Public places complicate things further. A museum may have many visitors and little memory of one quiet boy. A shop may have staff changing shifts. A music venue may have queues, tickets, informal gatherings, and people dressed in ways that make one teenager less distinct. A park may hold hundreds of passers-by and no record. You can move through each place in your mind, noting the smells of dust, food, damp grass, and old carpet, and understand how recognition might fail. The Gosden case is sometimes described through the question of why he went to London, but another question sits beside it. Why did no confirmed trace appear afterward? Those are related, but not identical. A reason for travel might explain the first half of the day, A confirmed trace would explain the second. The case went cold because neither question received a firm answer, and the station stood between them like a quiet dividing line. This dividing line has shaped every retelling. Before King's Cross, we can say Andrew did this, then this, then this. After King's Cross, we must say he may have, he might have, it is possible. The grammar changes. Certainty becomes conditional. In a case file, that shift is not poetic, it is practical. It tells investigators where their tools stop working. It tells families where hope must begin carrying more than evidence can support. Hope is not evidence, but it is not nothing. It keeps posters printed. It keeps interviews happening. It keeps a missing person's name from being reduced to an old headline. It gives families the strength to return to the public with the same plea, even when each return costs them something. In the Gosden case, hope has had to live alongside discipline, because every new claim still needs to be tested. You can admire that balance without making it loud. The public sometimes wants resolution more than truth. A theory feels more comfortable than open space. It gives the mind a chair to sit in. But families and investigators need truth, not comfort. And truth may take longer, or never arrive in full. That is why we move carefully tonight. We can name uncertainty without filling it with invention. We can follow the case after the station and still admit where the flaw drops away. There are many reasons a flaw drops away in a missing person inquiry. The person may leave the expected route. The environment may be crowded. The records may be thin. The first alarm may be delayed. The person may use cache. Witnesses may not know what they saw. Technology may not preserve what it captured. In the Gosden case, these reasons gather together after King's Cross, making the coldness not a single locked door, but a row of doors that all closed softly. Softly closed doors can be more difficult than slammed ones. A slammed door draws attention. A soft door can be missed until later. Footage overwritten. A witness forgetting. A bus route unexamined in time. A shop worker moving jobs. A small interaction vanishing into an ordinary Friday. You can hear the quietness of it, and perhaps that is why the case stays with people. It does not announce its mystery. It leaves it sitting in plain sight. At times, Andrew's family has spoken of the possibility that he may still be alive, while also acknowledging the hardship of not knowing. That position is not contradiction. It is what absence asks of people. Until there is proof, the mind keeps space open. You can imagine the emotional discipline required to live there, year after year, not closing the door and not pretending the waiting is easy. The file records facts, but it cannot fully record that endurance. Detectives, too, must live with open space, though differently. They cannot build a case on longing. They need evidence that can be checked, challenged, and carried into formal processes. That need can seem cold from the outside, but it is a form of respect. A false answer would not serve Andrew. It would not serve his family. It would only give the world a story where an answer should be. So the patient work continues in the way cold cases often do. A call is reviewed. A new comparison is made. A public appeal is repeated near an anniversary. A detail is clarified. A lead is followed until it ends. The file returns to storage, then comes out again. You can see the cardboard box in a quiet office. The label slightly worn. The corners softened by hands. The Gosden case is not active in the daily news sense, but it remains open in the deeper sense. Open cases ask something of the listener as well. Not action tonight, not urgency, but a willingness to sit with incompleteness. You are not here to solve what decades of effort have not solved in a few minutes of thought. You are here to understand why the path became hard to follow, and to notice the patient humanity in that effort. The station did not swallow the facts completely. It simply gave too few of them back. You might return once more to the morning train. There is a strange gentleness in that image compared with everything that came after. A boy sits with a handheld game. The carriage rocks slightly. Outside, towns and fields pass by in a blur of late summer color. Passengers read, sleep, sip drinks, and look through windows. Nobody knows they are sharing a journey that will be studied for years. That unknowing gives the scene its quiet ache. The witness who remembered Andrew on the train gave investigators an important gift. She helped confirm that he had not merely bought a ticket, but had traveled. She placed him in the ordinary flow between Doncaster and London. Her memory became part of the inked timeline, yet even that gift could not reach beyond the station. It brought the investigation to King's Cross, then left it standing there with everyone else. King's Cross itself carries layers of movement. Long-distance rail, underground lines, buses, taxis, pedestrians, office workers, tourists, and local residents all overlap there. A person can enter one layer and leave through another. For detectives, that means every onward route must be considered, but not all can be pursued equally forever. Resources are finite. Time is finite. Footage retention is finite. The city's movement is not finite at all. You can see how quickly the question branches. Did Andrew stay near King's Cross? Did he head toward a specific shop? Did he use the underground? Did he walk toward a known area? Did he meet someone who was not visible in the station footage? Did he change his appearance or clothing later? Did he intend to come back that evening? Each question is reasonable. None by itself gives enough light. Reasonable questions can still exhaust an inquiry when they multiply without evidence. Investigators have to prioritize. They follow what is most likely, most urgent, most testable. They cannot physically search every street, speak to every passerby, or preserve every recording across London. That is not indifference. It is the practical limit of police work, especially when the first certainty arrives after crucial time has already passed. The Gosden case lives inside those limits. And yet, limits do not erase responsibility. They simply show where lessons can be learned. The wrong school call, the delay in identifying the King's Cross footage, the challenge of gathering CCTV quickly, all have been discussed because they matter. Missing children cases depend on fast escalation and careful systems. When systems fail, even quietly, the effects can last years. We can acknowledge that without raising our voice. Acknowledgement is part of respect. It respects Andrew by taking the timeline seriously. It respects his family by not smoothing over the hard parts. It respects investigators by recognizing the difference between blame and analysis. Tonight, as we turn the pages, we are not looking for someone to condemn in a tired old file. We are looking at how a trail was lost, so the coldness of the case can be understood. The file after the station is full of negative space. No confirmed purchase, no confirmed meeting, no confirmed communication, no confirmed later sighting. These absences are often repeated because they define the mystery's shape. You might think of them as the white margins around a printed page. They are not the words, but they determine how the words sit. In the Gosden case, the margins are wide. Wide margins invite speculation, and speculation has followed the case across forums, documentaries, articles, and late-night conversations. Some people focus on London events. Some focus on the single ticket. Some focus on the lack of charger. Some focus on possible grooming, despite the absence of a proven digital trail. Some focus on voluntary disappearance. Patient retelling does not need to choose without evidence. It can simply say that the facts have not supported one answer over all others. That restraint can feel unsatisfying when you are wide awake. For sleep and for truth, it is kinder. We let the case breathe as it is. We let the station remain the station, not a symbol forced into one meaning. We let Andrew remain a person, not a puzzle piece. We let the investigators be patient workers, not characters in a neat plot. The mystery is old enough now to deserve that calm. A cold case can become distorted when people forget the age of the missing person. Andrew was 14. That matters in every interpretation. A 14-year-old can be capable, bright, and independent, but still vulnerable in ways adults may not see. A 14-year-old can plan a journey and still misjudge what comes next. A 14-year-old can keep private thoughts and still need protection. The file must hold his intelligence and his youth together. Holding those together changes how you read the station. You do not picture helplessness, and you do not picture full adult control. You picture a boy between childhood and independence, making his way through one of the busiest transport hubs in the country. You picture confidence, perhaps, or uncertainty, perhaps, but not certainty in your own mind. The camera does not give permission for that. It asks only that you look. When you look long enough, you may begin to notice how much of investigation is built from ordinary noticing. A ticket clerk noticed a single fare. A passenger noticed a boy with a game. A camera noticed a figure at an exit. Family noticed what was missing from the house. School noticed an absence, though the message did not reach the right place. These noticings form the known timeline. After the station, the next noticing did not arrive firmly enough. That failure of firm noticing is not uncommon in public disappearances. People see each other constantly without recording each other in memory. A stranger's face rarely has a place to attach until a reason appears. By then, the mind may offer fragments, and fragments must be treated carefully. You can feel the sadness of that, because many people may have crossed near Andrew that day, and none could know they should remember him. The station exit, then, is not only a location. It is a boundary between noticed and unnoticed. Before it, Andrew's movements intersected with systems and people that could later be identified. After it, he entered a field of ordinary anonymity. That is a calm phrase, ordinary anonymity, but it holds much of the case's difficulty. It means being visible without being known. It means being present without leaving a trace someone can prove. As you sit with this section of the file, you might notice the temperature of the imagined room around you. The archive air is cool. The chair is a little hard. The paper has that faint, dry whisper when turned. Outside the window, if there is one, night presses softly against the glass. We are far from the loudness of King's Cross now, yet the file brings its echoes in. Those echoes are useful, if we listen gently. The announcements, the brakes, the luggage wheels, the overlapping footsteps, the small pause at an exit, the question of left or right. Patient detective work often means lowering the volume of fear so the facts can be heard. In the Gosden case, the facts are quiet enough that we have to lean close, but not so close that we invent words they did not say. There may have been a plan written nowhere. There may have been an impulse that lasted only a morning. There may have been a meeting arranged without leaving a trace investigators could find. There may have been a chance encounter. Each may have been discussed and checked in different ways over the years. But after King's Cross, without confirmation, each remains a shape in mist. We can name the mist without trying to live inside it. The patient question becomes not only what happened, but why the investigation could not narrow the possibilities. We have already seen several reasons. The delay before London became known, the limitations of CCTV storage and access, the absence of a phone trail, the use of cash, the crowding and complexity of King's Cross, the uncertainty of witness memory, the lack of confirmed later contact. Together, they made the inquiry wide and shallow after the station, when what detectives needed was something narrow and deep. Something narrow and deep might have been one clear sighting with independent proof, a time-stamped image in another location, a message to a known person, a transaction, a recovered object, a witness who spoke with him and could describe something not public. Without that, the search had to remain broad. Broad searches are necessary, but they are difficult to sustain forever. They require resources, public attention, and luck is never a plan. Still, investigators keep room for luck by preserving records. DNA profiles, dental information, photographs, statements, and personal details remain available for comparison. If an unidentified person is found, if a record surfaces, if a witness speaks, the old file can respond. This is one of the quiet strengths of cold case work. It does not always move, but it remains prepared to move. The file waits with a kind of disciplined stillness. That stillness is different from abandonment. Abandonment would mean no one is listening. In the Gosden case, people have listened for years. His family, police, charities, journalists, and members of the public have returned to the story again and again. The question is not whether anyone cared. The question is why care, effort, and attention did not produce the missing step. That is a harder and more honest question. You may think of all the old appeals as messages placed along a shoreline. Each one says, if you know something, come forward. Each one is sent into the public sea, and sometimes a wave brings back a possible sighting, a memory, a theory, a name. Investigators pick up what arrives and examine it. Most of it does not become the answer, but the messages continue because one day, perhaps, something different may return. In sleep, there is no need to chase that perhaps. We can let it exist. We can return to the file's slower rhythms, the sound of paper, the careful dates written out, the gentle repetition of place names. Doncaster, King's Cross, London, home, station, train. These words are not clues by themselves, but they are the path we can still walk. The path ends too soon, and that is why the case stayed cold. The school day Andrew left behind also deserves a quiet look, because it tells us what the journey interrupted. Lessons would have begun, registers would have been taken, chairs moved, pens clicked. The small machinery of ordinary education went on around an empty place. When the absence was noted and the wrong number was contacted, the system believed it had done what it needed to do. You can feel the softness and seriousness of that error. A missing child investigation often depends on ordinary systems noticing correctly. Schools, transport staff, families, police, and public services form a chain. If one link slips, the delay may be small at first, then large in consequence. That does not mean anyone understood the stakes at the time. It means the stakes were hidden until later. The Gosden case is full of hidden stakes, ordinary choices that became important only in retrospect. Retrospect is a bright lamp, sometimes too bright. It can make every detail look deliberate, every object symbolic, every missed chance unforgivable. Patient work dims that lamp a little. It still lets us see, but it prevents glare. You can look at the uniform, the ticket, the PSP, the missing charger, the key, the cash, and the camera image without demanding that each one confess. They are details, not answers. The key especially is a quiet detail. Andrew took it with him. Families and listeners have returned to that fact because keys are associated with return. They are small promises, even when made unconsciously. But people take keys automatically. They leave home with them because that is what leaving home means. You can hold both readings at once. The key may suggest he expected to come back. It may suggest only habit. Its metal remains cooler than our interpretations. The amount of money he withdrew has also been weighed often. It was a significant sum for a young teenager, enough to suggest he wanted options. But money alone does not reveal the plan. It can serve a day trip, a longer journey, food, tickets, shopping, or an emergency. Investigators would have noted the amount carefully, then looked for later use. When no later account use appeared, the cache became another quiet gap rather than a route. The lack of later account activity is one of the strongest reasons the case remained difficult. A person living openly usually touches systems: money, housing, medical care, work, travel, identification, communication. Even a careful adult may leave traces. A 14-year-old leaving without documents would find long-term hidden life very hard. Yet the absence of traces does not say where he went that day. It only narrows some longer possibilities, slowly and incompletely. You can see how the case resists closure from both directions. If Andrew meant to disappear long-term, the evidence of preparation seems thin. If he meant only a short trip, the lack of return is unexplained. If he met someone, the communication is missing. If he wandered, the later sighting is missing. Each explanation has an empty space in the middle. That is why the station matters so much. It is the last place before every explanation begins to fray. Fraying is a good word for an old file, though we use it gently. Threads remain. The train thread, the ticket thread, the family thread, the witness thread, the CCTV thread. After King's Cross, the threads do not snap all at once, but they separate, thin out, and become harder to follow. A cold case detective spends years looking for a way to braid them again. Sometimes they can. Sometimes the thread stays loose. The public conversation around the Gosden case has sometimes been intense, because the known facts are so few and so vivid. Few facts leave room for many stories. Vivid facts make those stories easy to imagine. A boy skips school, takes a train to London, appears on camera, and vanishes from confirmed record. The outline is stark, but the truth inside it remains hidden. We keep returning because the outline is clear enough to remember and incomplete enough to ache. But tonight, we don't need intensity. We need steadiness. We can let the facts remain themselves. We can let the unanswered parts remain unanswered. We can sit beside the family in thought, though not claiming to know their private grief. We can sit beside investigators in thought, though not pretending the work is simple. We can sit beside Andrew's last known path, not to dramatize it, but to understand why it became so difficult to extend. The phrase "after the station" contains a whole landscape. It means after the train journey was confirmed, after the CCTV image, after the last point where official certainty could stand. It means outside the frame, beyond the camera, past the doors into a city of millions. It means the investigation entered a place where ordinary tools no longer had enough purchase. You can feel the file grow quieter there, as if even the paper knows it has less to say. Yet less to say is not nothing to say. There is still much to learn from how the case cooled. It teaches the importance of rapid information sharing. It shows the limits of partial surveillance. It reminds us that digital absence can be as meaningful as digital presence. It shows how family knowledge and investigative evidence can support each other without becoming the same thing. It shows that a last confirmed sighting can be both a gift and a heartbreak. The gift is that Andrew's family knew he reached London. The heartbreak is that knowing that did not bring him back. You can imagine how many times that image has been studied, not just by police, but by people who loved him. A shoulder, a bag, a posture, the small shape of someone crossing a busy place, unaware that the image will become one of the most important records of his life. That is a heavy thing for a simple camera still to carry. In the quiet of our retelling, we can set that image down carefully. We do not need to stare at it forever. There are other parts of the file to revisit, other reasons the path became cold, other patient efforts that deserve attention. The next page might hold a media appeal, the next a possible sighting, the next a note about computer checks or transport inquiries. The file is not one picture, it is years of returning to the same absence from different angles. And as we move further into those years, the case changes tone again. It becomes less about the immediate search and more about preservation, preserving Andrew's name, preserving records, preserving public memory, preserving the chance that someone, somewhere, will connect a detail they once dismissed. Preservation is quiet work. It does not often make headlines. It is more like keeping a lamp trimmed low through a long night. You can picture the lamp now, its warm circle on the desk, the rest of the room falling into soft shadow. The Gosden case lies open beneath it, and the station page is still near the top because every later question leads back there. But the longer we sit, the more we understand that the coldness did not come from one missing clue alone. It came from many small silences gathering around a single boy's last confirmed steps. Those silences are not empty when you listen to them closely, because each one has a different sound. One is the sound of a witness going to bed before the appeal ever reaches them. One is the sound of a witness going to bed before the appeal ever reaches them. One is the sound of a witness can gather softly, like dust on a shelf, before anyone sees how much has settled. You can turn now toward the first days after the disappearance, when the known facts were still being assembled and every hour had a different kind of pressure. There would have been phone calls, questions, checks with friends, checks with relatives, and the repeated hope that some ordinary explanation would appear. You can imagine the texture of that time, the tightness in a voice, the cold touch of a handset, the paper where names and numbers were written quickly. The ordinary world had not yet accepted that it was becoming a case file. This early uncertainty matters, because searches often begin inside the most familiar circle. Family, friends, school, usual routes, local places. That is not a mistake. It is where loved ones and police must begin, because most answers, when they come, begin near the known life. But Andrew had already moved far outside that circle by the time the day was understood. You and I can see the train line clearly now. But the people living through it had to discover it one piece at a time. When Doncaster station became part of the timeline, the investigation gained direction. The ticket clerk's memory became important, and the train journey could be traced. You can imagine officers asking calm, repeated questions, not because they doubted the witness, but because accuracy depends on careful return. What time? What ticket? What was said? Did he seem nervous? Did he seem alone? The answers helped carry the file southward, toward King's Cross and the last confirmed image. The witness on the train added another piece, and that piece had a softness to it. Andrew was remembered as quiet, playing his PSP, behaving in a way that did not draw alarm. There is a strange tenderness in that, because it shows him passing through a public space without anyone knowing that the moment would matter. You can hear the train's steady motion beneath the memory, the muffled announcements, the shift of fabric seats, the faint press of buttons under a young person's thumbs. It was a journey, and it looked like one. By the time the investigation reached London, the trail was already older than investigators would have wanted. In missing person work, age is not counted only in days. It is counted in overwritten footage, in staff rotas changing, in receipts discarded, in passengers forgetting where they sat. A fresh lead may smell of rain still on a coat. An older lead smells more like storage, paper, and uncertainty. The Gosden case crossed that invisible line very quickly after the station. You can sit with the practical problem of King's Cross for a moment longer. It was not just a station. It was a junction of systems, each with its own records, its own staff, and its own limits. Rail, underground, buses, taxis, nearby businesses, street cameras, private security. To follow one boy through all of that, investigators needed time, coordination, and a clear idea of where he went next. What they had was a last confirmed sighting at an exit, and beyond it, possibility. Possibility can sound hopeful, but in police work it can be exhausting. It means every direction remains open until evidence closes it. It means every map becomes too large. It means a lead in Camden may sit beside a lead in Oxford Street, while another possible report comes from a fast food restaurant or a public square. You mark them, compare them, and ask whether the timings fit. Yet a map full of pins is not the same as a route. The station also created a problem of crowd memory. People in transport hubs are focused inward, even when surrounded by others. They watch departure boards, ticket gates, children, bags, escalators, phones and clocks. A young teenager walking past may not become distinct unless something unusual happens. Andrew may have moved through hundreds of lines of sight and still not become a memory anyone could later trust. That is hard to accept, but it is part of the human design of crowds. You know this from your own life, if you think gently about it. You have passed people whose days later became important to someone, and you never knew. You have stood beside strangers on trains, heard their bags rustle, watched them step away, and let them disappear from thought. There is no cruelty in that. It is how ordinary attention protects itself. In the Gosden case, ordinary attention became one more reason the trail after King's Cross was so difficult. As public appeals began, the case entered another phase, the phase where private fear becomes public information. Andrew's photograph moved beyond the family and police into newspapers, broadcasts, posters, and conversations. You can imagine the first time a stranger saw his face and read that he was missing, perhaps folding the paperback, perhaps glancing again because he looked young. Each appeal widened the search, but it also widened the space where mistaken recognition could occur. Mistaken recognition is not a failure of character. It is a feature of memory under pressure. When a face becomes familiar through media, people may begin to see resemblance in places where certainty is impossible. A boy with glasses, a dark shirt, a slight build, a quiet manner. These things can match many people. Investigators had to sort goodwill from evidence, not by distrusting callers, but by testing the details they offered. That sorting is slow, careful, and often thankless. You can picture a call handler writing notes as someone describes a possible sighting. The pen moves across a form. The caller speaks hesitantly, perhaps saying they may be wrong. The handler asks for the time, the place, the clothing, the direction, and whether the person was alone. Later, someone compares that account with what is known. It may be logged, followed, or set aside. A family may never know all the calls that came in and faded away. Some possible sightings are more haunting because they seem close enough to matter. Reports from London, in the days after the disappearance, have been discussed for years, including accounts that placed a boy resembling Andrew in public places. They are part of the Gosden case's long emotional geography. Yet, if they could not be independently confirmed, they remained just outside the firm timeline. You can feel how difficult that is, because a possible sighting offers shape, then takes it back. Investigators have to be disciplined with that kind of shape. If a sighting leads to no footage, no receipt, no second witness, and no later contact, it cannot become the next fixed point simply because it feels right. The file may carry it in a separate place, marked with care. It may be revisited later when another report comes in nearby, but it does not extend the inked path. It waits in pencil, soft and unfinished. The same patient discipline applies to theories involving meetings. If Andrew traveled to London to meet someone, investigators would need to know how that meeting was arranged. A phone call, a letter, an online message, a contact through school, social groups, gaming, music, or family circles. The known checks did not produce a clear arrangement. Computers were examined, school and library access were considered, and his gaming device was checked for network links. The absence of evidence there does not prove every possibility impossible, but it made the meeting theory hard to anchor. You can feel the difference between a theory and an anchored theory. A theory may explain the story in a sentence. An anchored theory must rest on something outside itself. A name, a record, a message, a sighting, a transaction, a recovered object. In the Gosden case, Many theories could be spoken. But after the station, they did not find enough anchors. They floated above the file rather than fastening to it. That is why digital checks mattered so much. They were an attempt to find invisible preparation. In later cases, investigators may find search histories, messages, online profiles, photographs, location data, or conversations that change everything. With Andrew, the digital landscape was sparse. He was not known to live a large online life, and the technology around him was less revealing than today's. You can hear the faint hum of an old computer tower in a schoolroom, and the quiet disappointment when logs offer little. The absence of a rich digital trail can be misread by modern listeners. We may assume that every young person leaves a record, but that was less true then, and less true for some personalities than others. Andrew's interests may have lived in objects, music, books, games, and private thought more than in public profiles. If so, there may have been no hidden archive of messages to discover. The file was left with the physical trail, and that trail ended at a door. Physical trails require physical witnesses. The clerk, the passenger, the camera, the family home, the cash machine. These were the witnesses before London. After King's Cross, the physical trail depended on strangers noticing enough to remember. You can see how fragile that becomes in a city. A person can buy something, ask a question, stand in a queue, turn a corner, and leave no durable trace. The ground does not keep footprints on pavement for detectives to read later. The cash machine itself sits earlier in the timeline, like a clear little marker. Andrew withdrew money before going to the station. It showed preparation, and it showed access to funds. But once the cash was in his pocket, it became private. You can imagine the notes folded into a wallet, slightly warm from his hand, carrying their potential without telling anyone where they would go. Cash gave him options and gave investigators silence. Both things were true at once. The clothing detail also carried both use and limitation. His t-shirt, often described as connected with a band, helped the public picture him. The dark clothing and shoulder bag made the appeal more specific. Yet in London, distinctive clothing can become less distinctive, especially near shops, music areas, stations, and crowds. A black shirt on a teenager may be noticed by someone who later hears the appeal, but it may also merge into many similar memories. Specific details can still become blurred. You might imagine an officer showing a photograph to shop staff days later. The staff member looks, frowns, and says maybe. Maybe he came in, maybe he did not. They served many young people. The lighting was poor near the back. The shift was busy. The officer writes this down. It is not useless, but it is not enough. In an old file, the word maybe can gather like fog. Fog is not a wall, though. It can lift in places. That is why anniversaries matter in cold cases. On the first anniversary, then later anniversaries, Andrew's family and police returned to the public. They repeated the date, the place, the age, the clothing, the station, and the fact that he had not been found. Each repetition was an attempt to clear a small space in the fog. Someone who missed the first appeal might see the next. Someone older might finally recognize why a memory bothered them. The passage of time changes who can help. A teenager who saw something in 2007 may become an adult more willing to speak. A person who feared embarrassment may decide it no longer matters. Someone who worked near King's Cross may move away, then see an appeal online years later. Memory may fade, but conscience can sharpen. The Gosden case has relied on that possibility more and more as the immediate evidence aged. You can picture an anniversary appeal as a quiet ritual. A photograph is chosen, words are prepared, a police statement is checked, a family member speaks with visible care. Journalists ask questions that may have been asked before, and still the answers are given because repetition is necessary. The room may smell of hot studio lights or office coffee. Outside, ordinary weather passes over ordinary streets. Inside, a name is held up again, patiently. The emotional labor of that repetition is easy to underestimate. For the public, an appeal may be a short item in the news. For the family, it is another return to the morning everything changed. It requires speaking clearly while carrying uncertainty. It requires asking strangers for help without knowing whether anything will come. You can feel the steadiness in that, and you can let it be part of the case's work, not just its sorrow. Detectives also use anniversaries, because memory is sometimes attached to calendars. Someone may remember that they were in London on that date because of a birthday, an event, a school term, a work trip, or a concert. The date can unlock context. It can help a person say, "Yes, I was near King's Cross because I had an appointment that morning." Without the date, the memory may float. With it, the memory may settle enough to examine. But even when memories settle, they need corroboration. This is one of the quiet frustrations after the station. A person may say they saw Andrew, and the timing may seem possible, but if there is no supporting evidence, investigators cannot build too much on it. They can compare, revisit, and hold it. They can search nearby records, if any remain. Years later, though, many supporting records are gone. The lead becomes a carefully stored question. The case's long public life has also meant that new generations encounter it without the original context. They see the CCTV still first, perhaps, or a summary of the train journey. They may not know how different digital life was then, or how quickly surveillance footage could disappear. They may wonder why no one simply tracked him, as if a modern phone were in his pocket. Patient retelling restores context. It places the case back in its time, with the tools and limits that existed then. Context does not solve anything, but it changes the temperature of judgment. It helps us see why the station could be both highly surveilled and still insufficient. It helps us understand why a teenager could travel without leaving many records. It helps us see why delayed awareness mattered. It helps us hold the investigator's work within the real conditions of the day. In the Gosden case, context is not decoration. It is part of the explanation for why the file cooled. You can return to King's Cross with that context in mind. The cameras there were useful, but they did not form a perfect net. The public was dense, but not attentive in the investigative sense. The transport routes were many, but not all traceable. The surrounding streets were full of places to go, but few that would automatically record a name. A boy with cash and no phone could move a surprising distance without creating a durable trace. That is the plain difficulty. Plain difficulties can be more powerful than elaborate ones. They don't require a complicated plot. They only require timing, a crowd, imperfect systems, and a person whose next step was not captured. The Gosden case went cold after the station because those plain difficulties aligned. It is tempting to search for one missing master clue, but the file suggests something quieter. The Gosden case went cold after the station because those plain difficulties aligned. It is tempting to search for one missing master clue, but the file suggests something quieter. The trail may have been lost through many small ordinary failures of visibility. Visibility is not only about being seen, it is about being seen in a way that can later be connected. Andrew was surely visible to someone after he left the station, at least for a moment. But was he visible as Andrew? Was he visible as missing? Was he visible long enough to be remembered? Was he visible to a camera that kept its recording? Those questions show how sight and evidence are not the same thing. This distinction can be felt in every possible sighting. A person may have seen a boy. That is sight. To become evidence, the sight must connect reliably to Andrew, to a place, to a time, and preferably to something else that can be checked. Without that connection, the sight remains human and sincere, but not conclusive. You can hold that gently, because it is no one's fault that memory has limits. It is simply the nature of the work. As the investigation aged, another kind of work became important, keeping Andrew recognizable across time. Age-progressed images tried to imagine his face at later ages. These images are careful approximations based on photographs, family resemblance, and artistic or forensic methods. They cannot show exactly who he became if he lived, but they offer the public another way to look. A child missing for years cannot remain only the child in the original photograph. There is something deeply human about age progression. It is the file trying to account for birthdays that passed without confirmation. It is a visual form of waiting. You can imagine a printed age-progressed image lying beside the school photograph, the two faces connected and not connected, one known and one guessed. The paper may be smooth under your hand, but the feeling it carries is complex. It asks the public to recognize both memory and possibility, yet age progression also shows the difficulty of long-term missing cases. The longer someone is missing, the more recognition must stretch. Hair changes, glasses change, face shape changes, clothing style changes. A person may look like family or not. A person may intentionally alter appearance or simply grow. The public is asked to notice resemblance across time, and that is hard even when people are trying. The years themselves become part of the coldness. Years also change the witness pool. Some people move away, some die, some forget. Businesses close, staff records vanish, old cameras are replaced, transport systems update. The city that might have held clues in 2007 becomes a different city. When investigators return to old leads, they are often working against the erosion of environment as much as memory. You can hear that erosion in the phrase, "The shop is no longer there." The area around King's Cross changed significantly in the years after Andrew disappeared. Redevelopment altered the surrounding landscape, bringing new buildings, new flows of people, and new surfaces over old ones. For a cold case, such change can make physical reconstruction harder. It does not erase records already kept, but it changes what can be walked and seen. You can stand near the station now and not fully stand in the station environment Andrew left. The place has moved on, while the file has stayed anchored. This difference between place and file is subtle, but important. The file preserves a version of the city that no longer exists exactly as it was. Old maps, old photographs, and old statements become a way of entering that city again. Investigators and researchers must ask, where was the exit then? What businesses stood nearby? Which routes were most natural? Which cameras faced which way? The work becomes partly historical, a form of urban archaeology around one missing boy's path. You can imagine laying old and new maps side by side. The paper edges do not quite align. Street names remain, but surroundings shift. Entrances change. Developments rise. A building that once cast a shadow over a pavement may be gone. This kind of comparison is quiet, almost clerical, but it matters. A possible sighting tied to a location must be understood in the location's original form, not the version a later visitor knows. The Gosden case, therefore, became not only a missing person investigation, but a preservation of context. The date, the transport layout, the school systems, the camera practices, the family routines, the technology, the cultural habits of a teenager in that era, all had to remain attached to the file. If any one of those is pulled out of time, the case begins to look simpler than it was. Patient work keeps the time around the facts. Time around the facts includes the morning at home. Andrew reportedly appeared to leave for school, then returned after his family had gone, changed clothes, and left again. That detail suggests privacy and planning, at least for a short period. You can picture a quiet house in Doncaster, the familiar smell of breakfast fading, the sounds of the street outside, and a young person moving through rooms he knew well. No one watching, no one yet alarmed. The decision to return home before leaving for London matters because it separates the outward appearance from the private action. To others, he had begun a school day. In reality, he had made another plan. Investigators would have looked closely at that gap. Did he leave anything arranged? Did he take anything unexpected? Did his room suggest preparation? Did his behavior in the days before contain signs people only recognized later? Every family in such a case searches backward for meaning. Searching backward is one of the hardest human habits after a disappearance. A comment becomes important. A mood becomes important. A request, a silence, a song, a route, a small change in routine, all are lifted and examined. Sometimes they matter, sometimes they do not. But loved ones cannot help looking. Detectives, too, look backward, though they must place each memory beside evidence. The past becomes crowded with things that might have been signs. In Andrew's case, no simple sign emerged that explained the journey. That absence deepened the mystery. If he had been openly distressed, openly planning an outing, openly communicating with someone unknown, or openly fascinated with a specific London event, the file might have followed that path more firmly. Instead, investigators had a planned action without a declared reason. You can feel the quiet difficulty of that. The why remained private. Private reasons are common in adolescence. They may be small to adults and enormous to the young person. They may be impulsive, embarrassing, joyful, experimental, lonely, curious, or not fully formed. We should be careful not to fill Andrew's mind with our own inventions, but we can understand that a private reason might not leave records. It might exist only in thought until it becomes action, and then the action is all the file can see. That is another reason the case went cold after the station. If the motive was private and undocumented, investigators had to infer from behavior. Behavior took Andrew to London. Behavior did not reveal the destination. Once he left the station, behavior was no longer captured. The motive, the movement, and the evidence all disappeared from view at nearly the same point. It is difficult to build a bridge when both banks are hidden. The bridge detectives tried to build used every available material: transport records, appeals, interviews, digital checks, financial checks, family knowledge, public sightings, media coverage, later forensic possibilities. Each material had some strength, but none stretched all the way across. You can see the bridge in the file, partial and careful, reaching from Doncaster to King's Cross with certainty, then extending into London in shorter, less secure pieces. Beyond that, the water is quiet. There is no need to make that water dark tonight. We can leave it quiet. The purpose here is to understand, not to frighten. A cold case like Andrew's has enough sadness in its facts, without adding shadows of our own. What matters is the patient human effort to keep asking responsibly. Where was he last confirmed? What did he take? What did he leave? Who saw him? What records existed? What records were lost? What can still be checked now? The present tense checking is a different kind of work from the first search. It is slower and more dependent on systems. Missing person databases, unidentified person comparisons, occasional new appeals, and any information offered by the public. It may involve officers who were not part of the original inquiry, reading the case as history and responsibility at once. You can picture them in a modern office, screens brighter than the old footage, pulling an old case into a new interface. But even modern tools need data to work with. They cannot invent a record that was never made. They cannot recover every overwritten camera. They cannot know what a stranger forgot before knowing it mattered. This is one of the sobering lessons of the Gosden case. Technology can help cold cases, but it cannot erase all losses caused by time. The gap after King's Cross remains a gap unless something new enters it. New information sometimes arrives in unexpected forms. A caller, a recovered device, a record found during another inquiry, a witness rethinking a memory, a person connected to a possible sighting, finally speaking clearly. Investigators remain open to these possibilities because cold cases have changed before through one small late detail. But openness is not the same as resolution. Until a detail proves itself, the file must continue to hold the unknown. The public may ask why, after so many years, the case is still discussed. The answer is simple and not simple. Andrew has not been found. His family has not received an answer. The last confirmed sighting remains fixed at King's Cross. The case contains lessons about missing children, systems, public appeals, memory, and the limits of evidence. And beyond all that, a young person stepped out of a station and did not return to the known record. That is enough for people to keep remembering. Remembering, however, should be done with care. The case is not a canvas for cruelty or performance. It belongs first to Andrew and to the people who love him. When we retell it, especially in a calm late-night way, we take only the space needed to look respectfully. We don't sharpen the unknown into entertainment. We let the investigative patience be the center, the slow checking, the old footage, the appeals, the years of holding a question without turning it into spectacle. You can feel the difference in tone when a case is treated that way. The station becomes not a dramatic stage, but a difficult place to investigate. The ticket becomes not a prophecy, but a choice, without a known reason. The missing charger becomes not a hidden code, but an object left behind. The possible sightings become not plot twists, but human attempts to help. Everything softens into its proper size, and the mystery becomes more honest. Honesty also means accepting that some details may never yield more meaning. The single ticket may never explain itself. The key may never tell us whether Andrew intended to return. The absence of a charger may never settle the length of his plan. The camera still may never show the next turn. Patient investigation returns to details often, but it must also know when a detail has been listened to as fully as possible. Then it waits for something new. Waiting is one of the main actions in a cold case, though it rarely looks like action from outside. Waiting for a call, waiting for a test, waiting for a comparison, waiting for a witness to feel ready, waiting for technology to improve, waiting for someone to recognize a face. This waiting is not passive when the file is maintained and appeals continue. It is a steady posture, like keeping a chair open at a table. The Gosden family's waiting has been public in ways most families never have to experience. Their words have been quoted, their hope examined, their pain revisited by strangers. Yet they have continued to speak about Andrew as a person, not merely as a case. That matters. A missing child can become frozen in public memory as the moment of disappearance. Family testimony keeps the fuller person present, with habits, humor, interests, and relationships that existed before the file. You and I, sitting with the file tonight, can keep that fuller presence in mind. Andrew was not only the boy on the King's Cross camera, he was also the son leaving a house in Doncaster, the brother in a family, the student with a mind others noticed, the teenager with music and games and private thoughts. The case went cold after the station, but his life before the station was warm with ordinary detail. That warmth should remain visible. Ordinary detail can be a form of respect, the sound of a school bag being lifted, the feel of a train ticket, the faint mark of a cash machine receipt if there was one, the slight weight of a handheld game, the texture of a band t-shirt, the brightness of station tiles under overhead lights. These details do not solve the case, but they keep it grounded. They prevent the unknown from becoming abstract. Abstract mysteries are easy to mishandle. Real missing people require restraint. That is why we come back to method. What did investigators know? What could they test? Where did certainty end? How did time affect the evidence? Why did King's Cross become the last fixed point? These questions are calmer than speculation, and they lead us closer to the actual reasons the Gosden case went cold. The answer is not one thing, it is a convergence. The convergence begins with Andrew's private decision to leave school and travel. It continues with the delayed recognition that he was missing in a way that required urgent action. It includes the movement from a local search to a London search, It includes incomplete or delayed CCTV recovery. It includes cash, no phone, no confirmed digital contact, a crowded transport hub, and witnesses who did not know they needed to remember. It includes the simple breadth of London. Each part is understandable alone. Together, they form a very hard investigative landscape. You can think of it as a field at dusk, where each step is visible for a moment, and then the light lowers. Detectives could see the early footprints. They could see the gate at the far side. Beyond that, the ground became too wide and too dim. They did not stop wanting to follow. They simply lacked the next clear mark. And still, even in that dimness, the case has not vanished. It has remained present through appeals, charity profiles, media reports, and the continuing hope that someone may hold a missing piece. The file has crossed from one year to another, from one phase of technology to another, from one public conversation to the next. You can imagine its label being read by people who were children when Andrew disappeared, and adults when they first learned his name. Time changes the listeners, but the question remains. The question after the station is both specific and open. Did Andrew walk toward a destination? Did he meet someone? Did he change route? Did he remain in London? Did he leave London again? The file cannot answer, but each possibility leaves investigative traces that were sought or considered. You can feel the patience required to keep these possibilities in proportion. None should dominate without evidence. None should be dismissed only because it is uncomfortable or incomplete. This proportional thinking is part of why cold case detectives often seem cautious. They know a theory can become sticky. Once people repeat it, they may interpret every detail through it. A single ticket becomes proof of one idea. A missing charger becomes proof of another. A possible sighting becomes certainty in public retelling. The disciplined investigator returns to the page and asks, "What do we actually know?" It is a simple question, and a necessary one. What we actually know takes us again from Doncaster to London. It takes us from home to station, from ticket to train, from train to CCTV. It takes us to Andrew leaving King's Cross. It does not take us beyond that with certainty. That is the core of the matter. Everything after must be held carefully because the next confirmed line has never been added. The coldness lies in that missing line. You can pause over the phrase "missing line" and imagine the file as a ruled notebook. The first lines are filled in neatly. Then, halfway down the page, the writing stops. There is room beneath it. Plenty of room. Years of room. Investigators, family, and strangers have all tried to add the next sentence, but the evidence has not allowed it. The page remains open, not blank, but unfinished. Unfinished pages have a way of drawing the eye. They ask to be completed, but a patient narrator, like a patient detective, must leave them unfinished when truth has not arrived. That is not failure in the moral sense. It is honesty in the factual sense. The Gosden case asks for that honesty again and again. It asks us not to confuse our need for an ending with the existence of one. The next part of the file brings us back to the public, because after the immediate searches, public attention became one of the few tools that could still reach beyond the lost footage and faded memories. Appeals asked people to look at Andrew's face and consider whether they had seen him. They asked people in London, Doncaster, and elsewhere to think again. They also asked anyone who knew something to come forward, even if the information felt small. Small information can matter. A time, a direction, a phrase, a place where someone paused, a detail about a bag or shirt not widely remembered. In old cases, small information can become a hinge if it connects two larger pieces. But small information must first reach someone who can test it. That is why appeals keep repeating phone numbers, charity contacts, and police requests. The repetition may sound plain, but it keeps a pathway open. You can imagine one of those appeals being read in a quiet kitchen. The kettle clicks off. A newspaper lies folded on the table. Someone sees Andrew's photograph and feels a slight uncertainty. Did I see that boy? Was it that day? Was it near the station? The person may call or may decide they are probably wrong. The investigation depends, in part, on these private moments of decision scattered across thousands of ordinary homes. Not every private moment becomes part of the file. That is another quiet difficulty. People may withhold uncertain memories because they fear wasting police time. They may assume someone else has already reported it. They may feel embarrassed that they cannot be sure. In missing person appeals, police often say even small information may help for exactly this reason. A fragment that feels useless alone may match another fragment somewhere else. The challenge is persuading the fragment to arrive. The Gosden case has received many fragments, but none that publicly extended the confirmed timeline. That distinction matters. There may be information held back by police, as in many investigations, but the public record remains anchored at King's Cross. We do not need to pretend to know the unseen file. We can only speak from what is known, and from the general method of patient inquiry. The known path remains short after the station. As years passed, online discussion created a new kind of public archive. People collected reports, compared timelines, shared maps, and debated possibilities. This kept Andrew's name visible in some ways, and visibility can matter. But online attention can also become untethered. It can repeat errors, harden speculation, or forget the human being at the center. A careful retelling takes the useful part, the sustained attention, and leaves behind the noise. Noise is something investigators have to manage too. Every public case brings tips of varying quality. Some are thoughtful, some are mistaken, some are vague, some may be malicious or self-serving. Each one can require time. The more famous a case becomes, the more information arrives, but not all information moves the case forward. You can imagine the sorting again, the quiet administrative labor behind every appeal. The volume of response can itself become work. Work of that kind rarely appears in summaries. A summary says police followed several leads. It does not show the phone calls, the database entries, the travel to interview someone, the waiting for footage, the checking of dates, the second officer reading the first officer's notes. It does not show the emotional restraint required when a lead seems promising and then fades. Yet this hidden work is the backbone of cold case investigation. The Gosden file is made of it. The public may remember the visible moments, the disappearance date, the CCTV image, later appeals, and later arrests that did not lead to charges. Investigators remember, or at least record, the invisible work between those moments. They know how many paths ended quietly. They know how many details were checked and could not be made to fit. They know that a cold case is often cooled by 1,000 small endings rather than one large one. Those small endings deserve a little space here. A sighting checked and not confirmed. A camera requested too late. A possible connection disproved. A witness unsure. A digital lead producing nothing. A family address ruled out. A financial record silent. Each one is a door opened and closed. None solves the case, but each shapes the remaining search. You can hear the soft closing of those doors, one after another, down a long corridor. Still, the corridor does not end. It bends. It returns to the station, to the train, to the morning, and to the question of Andrew's intention. Intention is a difficult word because it suggests clarity, and human intentions are often mixed. A person may intend a day out and carry deeper feelings unspoken. A person may intend to meet someone and still feel uncertain. A person may intend to return and then be prevented. The evidence shows action, not the full inner weather. Inner weather is not a forensic category, but it matters to understanding. We must not overstate what anyone knew of Andrew's thoughts that day. We can say he made deliberate movements. We can say he concealed his absence from school, at least temporarily. We can say he traveled to London. We cannot say from those facts alone what emotional state accompanied him. You can feel the restraint required here. It is a quiet form of respect. The physical weather that day has also been mentioned in some accounts, as people try to place the morning in the senses. Early autumn, school term underway. The kind of day when a coat might or might not feel necessary, depending on where you were and how long you expected to be out. Andrew did not take a coat, and that fact has been read many ways. It may suggest a short trip. It may suggest oversight. It may suggest nothing definite at all. A coat is like the charger and the key. It belongs to the group of objects that invite interpretation but resist proof. You can lay them together on the imagined desk. No coat, no charger, key taken, cash taken, passport left, uniform left behind. The arrangement looks meaningful because all arrangements do after someone disappears, but the exact meaning remains out of reach. The Gosden case asks you to tolerate that incompleteness. Tolerating incompleteness is not the same as giving up. It is the mental posture that allows long work to continue without distortion. Detectives must live there. Families are forced to live there. Listeners tonight can visit that place gently and then rest. We do not carry the same burden, but we can learn from the patience required. An unanswered file is not empty. It is full of careful limits. One of those limits concerns what can be inferred from Andrew's academic ability. He was bright, and that fact has often been used to suggest he could plan well, navigate, or act independently. Perhaps he could, but intelligence does not remove youth, vulnerability, or uncertainty. Bright teenagers can make impulsive choices. They can underestimate risk. They can keep secrets badly or well. The file cannot turn intelligence into a map of his intentions. It is simply one part of who he was. Another limit concerns out-of-character behavior. Families know patterns deeply. And when someone acts outside them, that matters. But an out-of-character act is not impossible merely because it is surprising. It may signal pressure, curiosity, opportunity, or a hidden part of life others did not see. Investigators had to take the family's sense of Andrew seriously while also following the evidence of his actions. That dual attention is delicate, and in the Gosden case it remains central. You can imagine interviewing teachers, friends, and relatives, asking whether anything had changed. Was he worried? Was he excited? Had he mentioned London? Had he mentioned music events, museums, shops, people, or wanting to be away? Each person would answer from their own closeness and limits. Some might remember nothing unusual. Some might recall a detail that later seemed larger. Detectives would compare these recollections, looking for a pattern that did not clearly appear. The lack of a clear pattern before the disappearance meant the London journey stood almost alone. That made the station even heavier as a clue. If there had been a known plan, King's Cross would be a waypoint. Without a known plan, King's Cross became almost the whole question. Why that station? Why that morning? Why a single ticket? Why no clear trace afterward? The station was both answer and question, a fixed place holding an unfixed meaning. King's Cross may have been chosen simply because it was where trains from Doncaster arrived. It need not have been the destination itself. From there, Andrew could connect widely across London. This is important because people sometimes focus on the station area as if it must contain the answer. It may, but it may also have been only the first London step. Investigators would have understood that, and it would have expanded the search considerably. The possibility of onward travel is especially difficult. If Andrew took the underground using cash, records may not identify him. If he boarded a bus, the same problem applies. If he walked, no transport record existed. If he took a taxi, memory and records would depend on many factors. If he bought another rail ticket with cash, A clerk might or might not remember. Each mode of movement after the station offered escape from certainty. The city gave him paths without names. You can trace those paths slowly on an imagined map, not to solve them, but to feel their number. South and west toward the West End. North toward Camden, east toward other stations and streets. Underground lines branching into tunnels. Buses moving above ground through traffic. Pavements carrying everyone everywhere. The station exit becomes a point from which lines radiate, and the file asks which line matters. No confirmed answer arrives. This radiating quality is one reason cold cases sometimes narrow through elimination rather than discovery. If you cannot find where someone went, you try to determine where they likely did not go. No bank use, no passport activity, no confirmed contact with known friends, no confirmed stay with relatives, no official records under his own name. Each absence closes a distant door, but it does not reveal the first few hours. The near mystery remains near. The near mystery is those first movements in London. It may hold the most important answer, and yet it is the part most damaged by delay and crowding. A first turn, a first stop, a first conversation, a first purchase. Anyone could have shaped the later course. But because those moments were not captured or confirmed, the investigation had to proceed without them. It is like trying to understand a letter after the first sentence has been torn away. You might think of the torn sentence each time the case returns to public attention. People bring new theories, but the missing first sentence remains missing. If it were found, many theories would fall away. A confirmed sighting in a particular place at a particular time could narrow everything. A confirmed companion could change the inquiry. A confirmed onward ticket could redraw the map. That is why even small information from after King's Cross would matter so much. Until such information appears, the case holds its quiet form. A deliberate journey, a public station, a confirmed exit, a long silence. The form is simple enough to remember, and complex enough to resist us. You can see why it has stayed in public consciousness. It is not cluttered with many known events. It is shaped by the absence of them. The mind returns to the gap because the gap is so clearly placed. The gap has a sound, if we let ourselves imagine it softly. The hiss of bus breaks outside King's Cross, the murmur of people near a crossing, a newspaper seller calling headlines, the small beep of a ticket barrier somewhere behind him, the city breathing in layers. Andrew moves through it, and then the file no longer hears him. Not because the world became silent, but because it became too loud in too many directions. That may be the gentlest way to understand why the Gosden case went cold after the station. The world after King's Cross was not empty, it was overfull. Too many people, too many routes, too many cameras not connected, too many memories not fixed, too many hours passing before the right place became clear. The investigation did not lose him in a void, it lost him in abundance, in the ordinary excess of a living city. Abundance can hide as effectively as emptiness. A deserted place may preserve a footprint. A crowded place wears it away instantly. A quiet lane may make one passer-by memorable. A station concourse makes hundreds forgettable by necessity. You and I can sit with that truth without fear. It is simply one of the practical realities of missing person work. The case file teaches it slowly, through each lead that could not be confirmed. The next box in the file, if we imagine one coming down from a shelf, might contain the longer public search. Posters, charity records, appeal transcripts, photographs, contact numbers, and notes from campaigns. The paper would have a different feel from the urgent early statements. It would carry time inside it. Corners softened, ink slightly faded, a face repeated across different designs, the search becoming both an investigation and an act of remembrance. Remembrance work has its own careful methods. Keep the photograph clear, keep the date accurate, keep the last confirmed location precise. Avoid exaggeration, avoid claiming more than is known, encourage information, protect the dignity of the missing person. In the Gosden case, these methods helped keep Andrew visible without creating a false solution. You can see the quiet discipline in that, the way words must be chosen and repeated with care. Care is especially important because a missing teenager can attract harmful speculation. People may project fears, judgments, or stories onto a life they did not know. They may speak as if the unknown belongs to them. It does not. A respectful retelling keeps returning to the evidence and the humanity. It says, Andrew was a real person, loved and missed. It says, the investigation had limits. It says, the answer has not been found. It does not use uncertainty as permission to be careless. The long search also shows the role of charities and public networks. Missing person organizations keep profiles available, offer support, and provide ways for information to come in. They help cases remain accessible after the first news wave has passed. You can imagine a profile page being opened late at night by someone who has just heard the name Andrew Gosden for the first time. The photograph appears, the details are read, the case becomes present again for one more person. That kind of presence may seem small, but cold cases are sustained by small presences, a shared appeal, a remembered date, a person correcting a mistaken detail, a journalist returning with care, a detective reviewing a lead, a family speaking once more. None of these things guarantees movement, but together they resist disappearance from public memory. In a case defined by vanishing after a station, that resistance has its own quiet meaning. Meaning, though, is not the same as closure. The family has sought facts, not symbolic comfort. Detectives have sought evidence, not only awareness. Awareness keeps the door open, but evidence is what would allow someone to walk through. This distinction is easy to miss when cases become widely discussed. Public memory can feel like action, but the action that matters must still connect to verifiable information. The Gosden case waits for that connection. You can imagine, even now, the kind of detail that would matter. Someone who saw Andrew after King's Cross and can provide a specific, testable account. A record linked to his name or appearance. An object found with a reliable history. A person who knows why he traveled. A piece of information that explains the direction of those first London steps. Not a theory polished smooth by repetition, but a fact with weight, something the file can hold. Until then, the patient work continues around the edges. Review, appeal, compare, preserve, listen. These are simple verbs, but they are not weak ones. They are the verbs of cold case investigation when the first search has passed and the answer has not come. You can repeat them quietly in your mind, not as a list to wake you, but as a rhythm beneath the story. Review, appeal, compare, preserve, listen. The file breathes in that rhythm. The Gosden case may feel especially haunting because it began with such ordinary independence. A teenager taking a train is not by itself unimaginable. Many young people test distance, curiosity, privacy, and freedom. What makes the case so painful is the absence that followed, and the lack of any confirmed return to ordinary systems. The line between an unusual day and a life-altering disappearance may have been crossed quietly, somewhere after the station, without anyone present understanding it. That quiet crossing is what investigators have tried to locate, not only physically, but evidentially. Where did the day stop being traceable? We know the answer in formal terms. King's Cross. But there may have been another crossing after that. A moment where Andrew's private plan met something unexpected, or where one route became another. The file cannot show it. It can only point to the last place before it. You can feel the distance between those two kinds of knowing. Formal knowing is clean. It says, last confirmed sighting. Human knowing is messier. It asks what he felt, who he saw, whether he hesitated, whether he was hungry, whether the city seemed exciting or overwhelming. Investigators may wonder such things, but they cannot build reports on them unless evidence appears. As a narrator, we can acknowledge them softly, as possibilities of human experience, without mistaking them for fact. Perhaps he moved with purpose. Perhaps he had been to London before and felt some familiarity. Perhaps he relied on signs, maps, and the flow of other passengers. Perhaps he underestimated the size of the city. Each perhaps is a small, unlit window. We do not open them tonight. We simply pass them, noticing that they exist, and return to the hall of known facts. Known facts have their own calm strength. Andrew left home. Andrew did not attend school. Andrew withdrew money. Andrew travelled from Doncaster to London. Andrew was seen on CCTV at King's Cross. After that, no public confirmed sighting has carried the timeline forward. These facts are few, but they are firm. They form the spine of the case, and everything else must be placed around them with care. The spine is why the case can be retold responsibly without becoming fanciful. You can always return to it. If speculation begins to drift, the spine brings you back. Doncaster, train. King's Cross. No confirmed onward trace. That return is not repetitive in a useless way. It is how investigators maintain orientation in a wide landscape. You may turn many pages, but the central line remains the same. Orientation matters because the Gosden case has accumulated emotional weight beyond the evidence. People identify with the family, with the vulnerability of a young traveler, with the unsettling idea that a public place can still fail to protect a person from becoming untraceable. These responses are natural, but they can make the mind hurry. The file asks us not to hurry. It asks us to separate feeling from fact while honoring both. Honoring feeling means allowing the sadness to be present without letting it dictate the answer. Honoring fact means refusing to fill gaps with certainty. This balance is the heart of patient detective work. You sit beside the unknown, neither turning away nor pretending to see through it. The Gosden case, after the station, gives us exactly that kind of work. It is a long practice in staying with what can be known. You can feel the room getting quieter as we stay with it. The lamp is still warm. The imagined archive air remains cool. Somewhere outside, traffic softens into a low thread. The papers on the desk are no longer new to you. The ticket, the CCTV, still. The appeals, the possible sightings, the digital checks, the family statements, all have taken their places. The unanswered space between them has not closed, but it has become more understandable. Understanding the coldness does not make it less sad, but it makes it less mysterious in its mechanics. A case can go cold because evidence is destroyed deliberately, but it can also go cold because evidence was never captured, or was captured too briefly, or was captured and lost before its value was known. In Andrew's case, the known public record suggests the latter pattern. Much of what might have helped after King's Cross was fragile from the beginning. Fragile evidence requires early recognition. Once the recognition came late, the fragility mattered more. That is the lesson hidden inside the station. A public camera image can feel solid, but it is only one tile in a floor. If the surrounding tiles are missing, you cannot cross safely to the next room. Detectives had one tile. They needed another, and another, and another. The floor after King's Cross did not appear. This is why even a brief confirmed sighting beyond the station would have changed the case. It would have shifted the last known point, narrowed the map, and altered every search radius. A sighting near a venue, shop, underground station, or street camera could have created new requests and new witnesses. Without it, the entire city remained possible. You can imagine how heavy that must have felt in the early days, when urgency was highest and certainty was thinnest. The family, facing that thinness, continued to ask for help. Their appeals often carried a message directly to Andrew as well as to the public, leaving open the hope that he might hear, might know he was loved, might come home or make contact. Those messages are deeply human. They are not investigative tools only. They are a form of reaching across silence. You can hear their gentleness in the years of repetition. A message to a missing person has a different texture from a message to witnesses. It does not ask for evidence in the same way. It offers safety, forgiveness, love, and a path back. In cases where voluntary disappearance remains possible, such messages matter. In cases where something else happened, they still express the family's truth. The Gosden case has had to hold both kinds of appeal, to Andrew and to anyone who may know something. That dual appeal reflects the unresolved nature of the case. If investigators knew Andrew had met harm, the appeal would narrow. If they knew he had chosen to leave and was alive, it would narrow differently. Because neither has been established publicly, the appeal remains wide and careful. It asks for information without assuming the answer. That width is compassionate, but it also shows why the case remains cold. The range of possibility has not collapsed. Range can be measured emotionally too. For a family, the unknown stretches between hope and dread. For investigators, it stretches between theories. For the public, it stretches between curiosity and concern. Tonight, we stay closest to concern. We keep the case low-voiced. We remember that the unknown is not a game. It is a real absence with a real name. And that name is Andrew Gosden. Names matter in old cases. They keep the person from becoming only a category. Missing teenager, cold case, King's Cross disappearance. These phrases are useful, but the name brings us back. Andrew. The file may use full names and dates, but a family uses a first name in ordinary rooms. You can imagine that difference, and it helps keep the retelling gentle. The case is public, but the loss is personal. As we continue through the file, you might notice how the investigative focus shifts from movement to contact. Once movement could not be traced, the question became whether Andrew contacted anyone later, or whether anyone had contact with him before. Known records did not show later contact with family. The bank account did not show activity. Official traces did not appear. These absences suggested that if he survived beyond that day, he did so without touching the obvious systems under his own name. That would be difficult for a young teenager. Not impossible in every conceivable sense, but difficult. Food, shelter, travel, identity, safety, and money all become practical problems. Investigators and family would have considered this. The longer no trace appeared, the harder a long-term voluntary disappearance became to reconcile with ordinary systems. Yet because no conclusive evidence of another outcome appeared either, the case could not close around that reasoning. It remained open. Open does not mean equally likely in every direction. Investigators may privately weigh possibilities based on information not public. The family may hold views shaped by years of contact with the case. Public observers should be modest. We can say why certain possibilities are difficult. We can say what evidence would be expected. We cannot announce what happened. The station remains the last public certainty, and modesty is the only honest posture after it. Modesty also helps when considering reported arrests years later. Those developments brought attention and concern, but they did not produce charges that resolved Andrew's disappearance. Police later made clear the arrested men were not believed to have played a part. For the public, such updates can feel like a sudden turn. For the file, they become another lead followed, tested, and set down. Patient work includes these returns to quiet after a burst of attention. A burst of attention can be difficult for families. It may revive hope, fear, and public scrutiny all at once. When it leads nowhere, the quiet afterward can be especially heavy. You can imagine the file going back into its box, not forgotten, but unchanged in the one way everyone most wanted it to change. That is one of the harsher rhythms of cold cases. Movement is not always progress. Sometimes movement only proves where the answer is not. Proving where the answer is not still has value. It clears false shadows. It protects the integrity of the investigation. It prevents people from being wrongly attached to a case. It may allow detectives to focus elsewhere, but emotionally, it can feel like walking a long corridor and finding another locked room empty. You acknowledge the empty room, close it gently, and continue. The Gosden case has required that kind of continuing many times. Continuing is easier to say than to do. It means maintaining attention when the public has moved on. It means updating records. It means answering new tips that may resemble old ones. It means speaking to the media again with no final answer. It means living with anniversaries that arrive, whether anyone is ready or not. You can feel the calendar turning in the file, year after year, each September bringing the date back into sharper focus. September has its own sensory presence in this story. The start of term, cooler mornings, school uniforms, train platforms with people returning to routines after summer. The light can still be bright, but the year has begun to tilt. Andrew's disappearance sits in that seasonal threshold. Not deep winter, not high summer, but a time of ordinary beginnings. That contrast between beginning and disappearance gives the case part of its quiet ache. The school term context also emphasizes how unusual the absence was. A weekday, a school day, a morning when expectations were plain. That is why the first assumption may not have been London, because London was not the obvious next place in an ordinary school morning. Investigations begin with probabilities, and then facts correct them. Here, the facts corrected everyone toward the train, but only after the train had already arrived and the city had already moved on. You can think of the city moving on as the central mechanical fact. By the time anyone knew to ask London to remember Andrew, London had lived several more days or hours beyond him, depending on the point in the timeline. Bins emptied, floors cleaned, shifts changed, cameras cycled, people forgot. The case went cold after the station, because the station was discovered as the last confirmed point after the most delicate evidence around it had already begun to vanish. That vanishing was not a single event. It was a process. Each minute made one kind of evidence less available. Each day made memory less sharp. Each week made a casual witness harder to find. Each year changed the city and the people who moved through it. When we say a case went cold, we sometimes picture a door closing. Here, it may be more accurate to picture warmth leaving a room gradually, until everyone notices the air has changed. Even then, people remained in the room. The family remained. Investigators remained. Supporters remained. The case was cold in the sense of leads, not cold in the sense of care. That distinction is important enough to keep beside us. A cold case can still be held with great warmth by those who refuse to let it disappear. The Gosden case is one of those cases, warmed by memory even as the evidential trail stays cold. You can rest for a moment with that image, because it is not an ending. It is only a way to understand the middle years. A file in a cool room, a lamp over the desk, a family photograph, a station still. A map of London with lines that do not yet connect. The silence after King's Cross remains, but the work around it continues softly, and we keep turning the pages. The lamp can stay low over that open file, and nothing in it has to be forced into a shape it has never taken. Andrew Gosden's disappearance remains unsolved, and his case is still open. He has never been found. No one has been charged in connection with what happened after King's Cross. And the quiet question of where he went has never received its answer. You can let that truth settle plainly, without drama, because the file itself has carried it for so long. There is a kind of mercy in saying only what is known. It leaves room for Andrew as a person, not only as the center of an old mystery, and it leaves room for the people who have loved him through every year of waiting. The station remains the last confirmed place, the image remains small and still, and beyond it the city keeps its silence. We don't need to lean harder than the evidence allows. So now we let the papers rest where they are. The ticket, the train, the station air, the camera still, the unanswered reports, and the long patience of those who kept looking can all lie quietly beneath the warm circle of light. You have followed the file as far as it honestly goes, and there is no hidden final page waiting to make the uncertainty neat. Some cases remain open not because people stopped caring, but because the missing fact never came forward. Outside the imagined archive, the night has softened around the windows, and the station sounds are far away now, reduced to a murmur that no longer asks anything urgent of you. The Gosden case remains where it has been for years, held between memory and hope, between what was seen and what was never found. For tonight, the file can stay open on the desk, the questions can grow quiet in the lamplight, and you can let them rest there,